Hello everybody and welcome to another Ultimate Decades video. Today's going to be a little different. Instead of gameplay as promised, I'm going to give you guys a recap of the first decade since we just finished 1300 to 1309. And thank you so much. I've just passed 200 subscribers, which is insane again to me. So thank you for checking out my videos and being invested in this crazy little let's play. But without further ado, we start in the year 1300, where we met our Generation Zero founders, Edmund and Isolde Rolfe, and their three teenage children, James, Elric, and Emma. Unfortunately, 1300 began with two deaths when Isolde died of whooping cough and Edmund died from an infection. I believe that being a carpenter, he may have sliced himself pretty badly, and with the overall lack of decent medical care at the time, the wound got worse and poor Edmund finally died of septic shock. This left our three founders alone and mourning the parents that they still needed at the time. Our heir James took over as the man of the house and got a few small jobs here and there while developing his carpenter apprenticeship in order to take after his father. What his parents didn't know, however, was that James loves music and was hoping to live out his dream of becoming a bard. This was tragically impossible when faced with the reality of their living situation. Elric's dream was always to become a knight to the King of Windenburg, and while it's virtually unheard of for peasants, he was able to become a squire because his father, Edmund, was actually a highly sought-after carpenter, and I like to think that he designed several cribs for King Arn of Windenburg and his wife, Queen Alice, therefore giving Elric an inn despite the siblings never having met the royal family themselves. Meanwhile, Emma decided that she wanted to train and become a midwife and bring life into the world as a way to cope with watching the life leave her parents' eyes. While working on the farm at his home, James saw a young noble girl walking by, looking distraught, and went to check on her. He learned that her name was Matilda and that she had also just lost her father, Lord Benedict Cecil, with whom she was very close. James was a bit nervous but respectful, and they had a brief, pleasant conversation before Matilda had to leave. It was a brief but impactful meeting that would affect them later on. In the year 1301, the siblings went to town to celebrate St. Valentine's Day with some food and drink paid for by their meager earnings. Emma decided to go on a walk out on the town when she was overcome with grief at the reminder of her parents' death, even a year later. A young, handsome man approached her to check on her and introduced himself as Cassian. Because only the Rolfe parents had ever been out on the town enough to meet any nobles and royals, Emma had no idea that Cassian is actually the Crown Prince of Windenburg. And the two had a pleasant and briefly romantic meeting before duty called and Cassian had to go back home without revealing his true identity. We're still in 1301, and James and Matilda continue to develop their friendship, which then develops into something more romantic. However, Matilda knew that if her mother, Lady Beatrice, found out about her relationship with James, that things would go downhill. As a noble lady, Matilda was expected to find an equal or better. The more she got to know James, the more she was beginning to rebel against the society in which she grew up. In the year 1302, Elric and Emma met Matilda and expressed to James that they really liked her. Emma and Matilda grew closer and became great friends, but Emma did not yet mention her little meetings with Cassian. As a loving gesture, Emma also used her earnings as a midwife in training to buy James a lute, which he appreciated greatly. A few months after meeting Matilda, Cassian finds Emma in the Pleasant Village and pays her a visit, unchaperoned, while her brothers were off working. We learned then that Cassian actually has a crush on Emma, and she feels the same way, though he's been respectful enough until now to avoid showing any physical affection, aside from a hug here and there and kissing her hands. The brothers catch Cassian as they arrive home and have their doubts as they immediately assume he has ulterior motives. Despite not knowing his identity, it's clear that Cassian's a noble, and they feared that he might be trying to take advantage of Emma, which led to a brief argument between Emma and Elric, though they made up soon after. Later that year, Elric meets a fun and silly girl from the village named Lavinia Fletcher at the bathhouse, and he's immediately smitten by her. On May Day in 1303, the siblings attend the festivities at the Windenburg marketplace. James plays some music and receives a few tips after the siblings have a brief archery competition with each other. Unbeknownst to James, Matilda's mother and her new stepfather, Prince Dargor, who is also the royal advisor and brother to King Arn, were attending the celebrations as well and arguing over what Matilda has been up to these past few months. Later that evening, a tipsy James decided to run over to the wealthy area of Windenburg to find Matilda while her brother Florian is asleep, and they go on a walk. Their passions get the best of them, and James uses that moment to propose marriage, which Matilda actually agreed to without a second's thought. We're still in 1303 when Lavinia and Elric are developing their relationship. Emma becomes good friends with Lavinia as well. Later on, James goes to visit Matilda at her home and is discovered by Lady Cecil, Prince Dargor, and Florian. Lady Cecil does not give her blessing when she learns of James and Matilda's engagement and disowns her daughter, while Matilda refuses to relent. In a heated moment, Matilda tells James that she just wants to marry him and get it over with, and the two elope at the Church of Windenburg. Heading into 1304, Matilda is getting used to the less luxurious lifestyle, but it's clear that she's happy with her decision, and she and James have a loving marriage. Cassian visits Emma, and Matilda is shocked when she opens the door to greet him, as she knows his identity. However, when it becomes clear that Emma doesn't know that Cassian's the prince, she decides to keep it to herself, hoping that Cassian would do the right thing and spare Emma any hurt. When Cassian leaves, Matilda just has a talk with her to let her know to be careful, since noblemen do usually have an ulterior motive when they're younger, although she can see that Emma and Cassian actually do care about one another very much. In mid-1303, Matilda finds out she's pregnant with her first child, and James is excited by the news. Meanwhile, Elric and Emma are at the bathhouse, where they see Lavinia, and while talking to Lavinia about James's recent marriage, Elric decides to stop beating around the bush and asks Lavinia to marry him, which she accepts. In 1305, Matilda goes into labor, and under the supervision of the midwife that she works with, Emma is there to help Matilda bring her first niece or nephew into the world, and Lavinia comes over to help the girls out as well. The labor lasted a long time, but Matilda finally gives birth to a healthy baby girl who she names Emmeline after her aunt, since she's so grateful for all of Emma's help. Emmeline becomes an infant later that year as well, after which Matilda's twin brother Florian finally finds her and lets her know that Cassian spoke to him and told him where she was. Florian let Matilda know that he supports her decision and got to meet his niece Emmeline before promising Matilda that he wouldn't let their mother know where she is. At the end of 1305, Lavinia and Elric have a sweet but chaotic wedding with her parents and a few of their friends present. After the wedding, Matilda finds out she's pregnant with her second child and finds that her second pregnancy has been extremely difficult. She's in a lot of pain throughout and gets sick frequently, but makes it to the labor stage, after which she gives birth to her first son in 1306, who James names Edmund after his father. However, poor little Edmund seems to have been suffering with an unknown birth defect and finally, unfortunately, passes away 3 months after his birth. Emmeline becomes a toddler at this time, which is the only good that seems to come from such a difficult time in their lives. In 1307, we start off at the Windenburg Palace, where King Louis of Willow Creek visits King Arn and proposes marriage between Cassian and his firstborn daughter Joan in order to unite their kingdoms. Arn accepts and tells Cassian, who's not happy by the news, and realizes he's going to have to tell Emma the truth about his identity after several years of miraculously keeping it secret. We also learn that Lavinia and Elric had their first baby, a healthy little boy who they named Dominic. James and Matilda become young adults, and shortly after receive an unexpected and unwanted visit from Lady Beatrice, who is shockingly pregnant and seems to be rubbing it in Matilda's face, even though we learn that she actually does not want to have this child. It becomes clear that she has no intention of mending her relationship with her daughter, and James finally kicks her out. The siblings reunite to meet little Dominic, and Elric and James seem to have a strained relationship for some unknown reason, but they're on the mend. While meeting Dominic, James expresses his own sorrows over losing little Edmund and worries because Matilda is pregnant again and seems to be getting sick like in her second pregnancy, but he tries to be optimistic. In 1308, Cassian finally visits Emma and doesn't hold back in telling her the truth. Emma doesn't take the news well and tells him to leave, but he respects her wishes with the intention of trying to make it work despite how impossible it all seems. Emma is completely devastated when he leaves, and James and Matilda try to be there for her without patronizing her, telling her that she's got to make her own decision on the matter and that they would support her no matter what. Later that year, Matilda gives birth to a little boy named George, or Georgie. The birth is difficult and Matilda barely makes it, but she and Georgie are healthy and happy to everyone's joy, except Emmeline, who seems to be having a hard time adjusting to having a new baby around when she's been the center of attention for so long. Around the same time, Dominic reaches toddlerhood and Lavinia's parents move in to help with the baby after having another baby of their own named Melissa. Back at the Windenburg Palace, Princess Joan of Willow Creek and her family are guests, and she and Cassian finally meet. They miraculously get along and develop a good friendship, but agree that they don't want to get married to each other and hatch up a plan to tell their parents they refuse the dynastic marriage proposition. Overjoyed with their mutual decision, Cassian visits Emma on the day of her birthday at the beginning of 1309. James is wary and he and Matilda get a little nosy, but finally give him some space to talk it out. Cassian tells Emma that he's in love with her and wants to be with her, and that he plans on completely giving up the crown so that they can live happily ever after. She's still hurt but overjoyed by the news, and the two make up and look forward to their future together. They're so certain that they'll end up together that Emma finally allows them to give in to their passions. She and Cassian spend the night at a local tavern over the Windenburg marketplace when James and Matilda think she's gone off to work. When Cassian says goodbye, he's unaware that his uncle, Prince Dargor, is there and catches them together. After he leaves, Emma meets a new guy in town named Leoric Weald. He's the brother of the local blacksmith Wallace, who has just moved to Windenburg from the countryside after the death of his parents. He's kind and funny and a bit socially anxious due to the obvious scars on his face from a bear attack, but Emma really enjoys his company and the two become fast friends. We also learn a little after this that Lavinia and Elric are pregnant with their second child and are overjoyed by the news. Back at the palace, Arn and Dargor confront Cassian over his relationship with Emma. Arn thinks it's just a silly affair, but Cassian finally tells his father that he intends on marrying Emma because he loves her and wants to give up the crown. He reasons that it can just go to his younger brother Quentin, who's next in line, but Dargor is whispering in Arn's ear that this is a terrible idea. Not only would they be breaking up a possible alliance between Windenburg and Willow Creek, but if Cassian were to have legitimate children with the peasant girl and decide his children have a rightful claim to the throne, it could mean a civil war among their own house. Arn agrees and threatens Cassian that his refusal would mean treason against the crown, and while he doesn't say it, Cassian knows that being accused of treason would probably mean his death. So he backs down and has a moment to himself where he realizes he's going to have to break Emma's heart a second time. He doesn't hold on to the news this time around and meets Emma near a pub in town where he learns that she is pregnant. They're both devastated by the news because they aren't married and this could ruin Emma's reputation around town. Still, Cassian does what he has to do and he lies to Emma, telling her that he's in love with Joan in order to snuff out any hope for their futures together. James, who followed Emma into town, overhears the argument and has had enough of Cassian's bull. The two argue and it escalates into a physical altercation that the local townspeople, including Leoric, witness. The devastation of it all takes a toll on Emma and she unfortunately loses the baby. Back at home, Emma learns that the townspeople are already gossiping about her affair with the prince and has begun to accept that this has probably ruined her marriage prospects when Leoric comes over to check on her and meet James. Even though they don't have any romantic love for each other, Leoric decides to ask James permission to marry Emma in order to save her reputation, and both he and Emma agree and get married at the church with their friends and family as witnesses. Leoric reassures Emma that it's going to be okay, but chooses to respect her and give her space on their wedding night. Shortly after the wedding, Lavinia goes into labor and Elric helps her bring their baby girl into the world and they name her Arabelle. While Arabella is healthy, they find out after that Lavinia is experiencing complications after the delivery and she unfortunately dies of a placental abruption, with her husband, children, and parents there to witness the sad end. And this sad note is where we end the decade. So there it is. These are the years 1300 to 1309. We had some great stuff happen and some very terrible, tragic stuff. and we ended on a very sad note. But we've got to keep looking up and hope that the next generation of Rolfs is doing okay. We do have the Great Famine coming up, which I am worried about, but we'll see where everything takes us. So thank you guys for watching. It's been a great ride so far. I look forward to whatever comes next, and have a great day. Bye.